Now, as you were just saying, birthright citizenship has been a law in the United States for more than 100 years. The 14th Amendment, we just saw it there on the screen, declares that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Now, like all of the amendments to the U.S. Constitution, it was not part of the Founding Fathers' original document. In fact, it was ratified 80 years later in 1868 as part of the country's reconstruction after the Civil War. The amendment ensured that formerly enslaved people were granted full citizenship. Jeff Swartz is a former judge in Miami-Dade County, Florida. He's also a professor at the Cooley Law School. I want to thank you for joining us. We just went through kind of what happened in court, but I want to ask you, why do you believe then that the court even agreed to hear this in the first place? Many have suggested, especially when we go through what happened in court today, that given it's part of the Constitution, it has no place coming before the Supreme Court, that it is settled law.
I would agree. I think that I didn't understand why they took it in the first place. Clearly, there were 5 justices who had concerns about birthright citizenship, or for whatever the reasons are, just wanted to give Mr. Trump the opportunity to have his lawyers have their piece towards the court. I just don't understand. I did not have a chance to listen to it at the time because I was teaching a class, but I did listen to the whole thing as it was recorded. And it was clear that other than possibly Justice Thomas, who was centering more on the idea of the slavery side of all of this and giving slaves citizenship as part of all of this, he was the only one that I saw had any qualms about this. In fact, most of them had some sarcastic comment or another going after Mr. Sauer when he was speaking.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, though, if there could be a reasonable adjustment made. It is not the right venue for it, but if we go back to what the 14th Amendment actually says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Is there wiggle room there to say, look, it shouldn't be that someone on a tourist visa gives birth in the United States and that their child is then given full rights as an American citizen?
There was something that came through in the questioning and the comments that were made that said that the amendment does not dispossess Congress the right of passing statutes that would relate to, although not overrule, this particular part of the 14th Amendment. For example, saying that people cannot, who have children while they're here on visitors' visas, or whether they are tourists or whatever reason they're here, other than legal residency, their children would not become American citizens. Addressing that one issue is something that they talked about, and I don't think they have a problem with statutes. That's why Kavanaugh asked the question, do we really have to overrule the existing case law, or can we just rely on the 1950 statute regarding citizenship and say that seems to control what's going on here, and we like statutes more than making constitutional decisions, so they actually could decide it on 2 or 3 statutes that have been passed in the 20th century regarding immigration and citizenship.
So if I understand you correctly, though, this would still be over to you, Congress, like so many of these issues.
That is correct. If they decide, they could come back and say, yes, we are affirming the prior decisions on birthright citizenship, but the idea that Congress cannot limit those who are eligible for it, they may say some of the statutes that have been passed clearly talk about it, and they would have the right to limit birthright citizenship to the idea of people who are not either domiciled here, are not legally here. Those type of things, they could pass statutes saying, I'm not so sure about this.
Jeff, grateful to you. I think we just got some insight into what a decision might look like, even if it is a dissenting position or something else that they put in this decision. We'll have to wait until June, though. Thanks again for being with us. I appreciate it.